Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and you may be wondering why my background is not my usual, and that is because I'm in the Netherlands. So while I was here, I thought I should get a head start on my book Unhaul because there are some books in my Dutch half of the collection that lives in the Netherlands that I really wanted to unhaul and get rid of, and then for part 2 of this unhaul, we'll be heading back to the UK where a future Olivia Savannah is going to show you some of the other books that she's decided to unhaul from her shelves. But without further ado, let's get down to the books that shall be leaving my shelves from over here. The very first one that I'm going to let go of is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, and this is the beautiful exclusive Loom Crate edition. This edition has been out for a long time now, and I don't think you can buy it anymore because it was exclusive, but I got this one when I was an Illumicrate rep and I was really grateful, and I'd read the first book and I'd enjoyed it, but I didn't feel a need to continue with the series. But then for a live show I did read the second book and I enjoyed it even less than the first book, and I DNF'd the series there, and since then I've tried other V.E. Schwab books and they just haven't been for me, so I'm officially not really reading V.E. Schwab anymore. So I didn't feel like there was any reason for me to keep this beautiful edition on my shelf, and I know that somebody else is really going to appreciate it. Also getting rid of, at long last, getting rid of the Shatter trilogy by Tahereh Mafi. This survived so many potential unhauls. I'd always look at it and be like, you didn't rate those higher than 3 stars. I even rated the last book, Ignite Me, 2 stars, so really I should have probably gotten rid of this a long time ago. But I really loved Kenji. He is the character that holds this series together. He was the glue of this whole series. Because I liked Kenji so much, I felt very sentimental every time I looked at the books, but my best friend Yana recently showed me her wish list of books, which I hadn't had the honour of having before, because I think she assumed that I would get her all of the books on it, which is very, very true. But I did promise that I would only get her the books if I was either unhauling them or secondhand shopping or something like that. So she wanted to try the Shatter Me trilogy, and I thought I can just unhaul them once and for all, and then she can try them as she wants to. So that is the reason why I finally let myself get rid of the Shatter Me trilogy. And speaking of series, I'm also unhauling the first 3 books in the Throne of Glass series: Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire. These are the 3 books in the series that I read. These are the mini editions, which is why they look so small in my hand. I had a comment last time about why they look so tiny on screen. It's because they're the minis. I was sent this series for review, so I went through and I read the first 3, and I think I read these 2 during 24-hour reading vlog experiences. So I did go through them and I gave them all 3 stars. Throne of Glass was okay, Crown of Midnight was better because of KO, and then Heir of Fire was an absolute bore, but I still rated it 3 stars for some reason. But I've DNF'd this series there. I'm not going any further, and in previous unhauls I unhauled the books that I owned in the UK, but these ones were here in the Netherlands, so now they finally get to go. Similar story for why I'm getting rid of Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I've already said this multiple times in vlogs, but I'll say it this one last time. My Shadowhunter ship has sailed. So I unhauled all of the Cassie Clare that I had in the UK, and this is the only Cassie Clare that I have read but want to get rid of, because I'm not getting rid of my Mortal Instruments. You can pry those books out of my dead cold hands, but I did want to get rid of this series because I read Clockwork Angel and it was okay. I had no feelings other than I hate Will and I love Jem. So maybe those are quite strong feelings. I guess I did have feelings. Up next we have 2 sequels, and those are Library of Souls and Hollow City. Both of these are by Ransom Riggs. These only survived multiple unhauls because I really liked the first book, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and then these 2 sequels were okay, and I know the series got extended, but I never continued with the extension of the series because I truly didn't like these sequels enough for me to want to read any more. And because they came in a nice box set that were in a very nice box when I won it in a giveaway, I just kept these 2 on my shelf because they looked good in the box set, but now I'm so over bookshelf aesthetic. So I've got just the 1 book. The first book is staying in my collection and these 2 can go. I remember waking up in the morning at like 6 AM and my mum saying, we are going to see Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children in the cinema today, and I thought, oh no, I haven't read the book. And so I spent the whole morning reading the book, and then in the afternoon we went to the cinema. That is how dedicated I was to reading the book before watching the film. And then we've just got a few more books here. So one of them is The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. This is a young adult contemporary book. I buddy read this one with someone a while ago. I thought it was okay. I didn't love it, I didn't dislike it, but at the same time it was by a Jamaican author, and you know, I'm Jamaican, and you know, so I just kept it around. But I've read a lot of young adult lately that I've really enjoyed, so this just doesn't compare and doesn't need to stay on my shelves. I'm also getting rid of Pygmalion by Bernard Shaw. For a while there I was collecting these Penguin Play editions, but I decided I don't like to do that anymore because they're typically very old, they're typically secondhand, and I don't like the spotting. I just don't like it. I know spotting can't catch and jump onto my other books, or at least I think it doesn't, but it really just, no, I can't do it. So I can't keep these really old secondhand editions, just like normal level of old secondhand editions. And Cara from Wild Book Garden got me a beautiful edition of this one where the cover has someone holding a teacup, which I absolutely loved, and so I don't need to keep this double copy, even though this was the original copy of the play that I read. I really like that play, by the way. Definitely recommend Pygmalion, such a good read. Then it's just about time for these two books. Ooh. These two books. So one of them is by Tibbets. This is like a little horror-y short story. I reviewed this back in my early blogging days when I was 13ish, and I really liked Tibbets' other series. I don't think this was my favourite of hers, so I'm just going to let it go. And then Shylock Is My Name by Howard Jacobson. This was one of those times where I was brave enough to request a review copy of something and I actually got it. It's a Shakespeare retelling of The Merchant of Venice, and at the time that I read it, it was very complex, it was very highbrow for me, and I was a bit young, and I don't think I understood everything, but I rated it 3 stars, and I had a whole review on my blog, and I felt very special to have received a hardback copy for review, because I was such a big fan of Shakespeare that it just felt amazing to me, and I've kept it on my shelves for a very long time. And for a while there, when I was in secondary school, A Merchant of Venice was my favourite play. I memorised parts of that and performed it as part of my school assignment. Either which way, I think it's time that I part ways with this book. And now, without further ado, future Olivia Savannah, take it away. It's Olivia Savannah here from the future, ready to continue this unhaul and tell you about a few more books that will be leaving my shelves and going elsewhere. So we also have The Appeal by Janice Hallett. This is a mystery book that is a bestseller and seems loved by so many people that I know, and yet I myself did not have a good time with it and did not like it in the slightest. I thought it was very predictable. It took way too long for a murder to happen, given that it says murder right there on the cover. I also really struggled with the characters. There was a certain character I thought was incredibly annoying, but other than that, I feel like I had so much distance from the characters because of the mixed media format this book was told in, and therefore it just was not one for me, and I really didn't like it, and so I'm not going to keep it on my shelf. We also have The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I haven't read this one, but the only reason I'm unhauling it is because I got a shiny new edition from the publisher themselves, as the sequel, The Family Remains, has recently released, and this is a secondhand copy with a cracked spine that I picked up just because I wanted to try something by this author. So I definitely still will be reading this one, just not this copy of it. A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahereh Mafi, which I read fairly recently, and I thought it was a decent contemporary book. It was handling some very important themes and it really tackled those well, and all of the discussion in it was good. It had a very sweet and very cute love interest, but I do think that this book did a lot of telling versus showing, and it skipped over some things, as in we've got a main character who loves breakdancing, but we don't really get to see the breakdancing happening that much, which I would have liked to see a bit more. And it took a while for me to get invested in the story. I don't think I'm going to be reading more of Tahereh Mafi's books. I've tried her fantasy, I've tried her contemporary, I've kind of just been unhauling all of her books. So I'm just going to let go of this very last one because I think this is the last one on my shelf at the moment. Also unhauling Only on the Weekends by Dean Atta. I recently wrapped this up in my July wrap up. It was one of my anticipated reads for this year, and unfortunately it severely disappointed me. I felt like the depiction of a closeted black character was a bit troublesome, the way it was shown, but also I just didn't like our main character. I thought he was really spoiled. I didn't like the main character's friends. I thought they were really homophobic and didn't do enough to kind of rectify and change that. It's filled with something that I don't like reading about. It's actually my least favorite thing to read, and this book has loads and loads and loads of it, so that wasn't very nice. And while I appreciated getting to see stuff about the queer community in Scotland, I appreciated getting the chance to read a novel in verse because I do typically tend to really love them, but this was not the one for me. I'm also unhauling The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, which I will have mentioned in that very same wrap-up. I read this one and I felt very mixed about it. I would not say that it's a bad book by any means. I liked it more than The Pride of the Orange Tree, and I'm just struggling to decide whether or not I want to continue reading the series. But either which way, this is quite an old hardback, leaving my shelf for the time being. So up next we have Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. I recently read this one and I had a very mixed experience with it once again. I thought that it did a good job in terms of the main storyline about this young boy suffering with grief post 9/11 where he loses his father. I thought all of that was handled quite well, and I liked the writing style of it, but I do also think that it had a whole storyline to do with the grandparents that I did not care about in the slightest, and I just know I'm not going to reread this one, and seeing as it was in the end a middle of the road read for me, I'm just going to pass it along to somebody else. I am a little bit sad about this one because as much as it is a book and books are for reading, it's also a bit of a souvenir for me because I got this one in France, in Paris, and it's stamped with the Shakespeare & Co. So it's quite a big memory for me of when I went to Shakespeare & Co. But at the same time, I also bought in that same trip The Help by Catherine Stockett, which I absolutely loved and I had a really good time with, and it's still on my shelf, and that's also got the Shakespeare & Co. stamp in it, which makes me feel a bit better about letting go of this one. Nothing Burns as Bright as You by Ashley Woodfolk, which is a novel in verse. I have not had the best time with novels in verse lately, even though I love reading them. So this was not actually a bad one, it was just okay. It's following these two black women who have a relationship with each other. Don't know why I said women, they're girls, they're in school, okay? So they're girls. And they really like starting fires, and sometimes that can blaze out of control. But also their relationship seems to be blazing out of control with its intensity. So it's following them, and I thought it was just okay, and therefore I'm not going to keep it because limited space. Escape Room by Christopher Edge. This is a middle grade novel that I read, and I was having such a good time with it right until the end where it went and spoiled everything. It's so rare for me that the ending can absolutely spoil the entire reading experience, but in this case it very much did. I struggled with our main character. I thought she was a bit two-faced in the way that she was saying one thing and then doing the exact opposite, telling everybody else to do one thing and then also going and doing the exact opposite. But it is a fun enough middle grade story if you are a child reading it, or an adult even, who really enjoys escape rooms, and it's very short and quick, so I think somebody else is going to like this a lot more than I did, and maybe the unbelievable ending won't be so bad an experience for somebody else. We've got two books together that I'm a little bit sad about that I'm unhauling them, but it's time, and those are Arctic Zoo and Killer Tea by Robert Muchamore. So Robert Muchamore is an author that I grew up reading. I really liked the Recruit series where it's like spies and children. I was a big fan of reading books about spies when I was young. I don't know why. I loved spies. Arctic Zoo and Killer Tea were some of his, at the time that I got them, his recent releases in terms of the like 12 to 15 age category, so like young adult. And I met him, which was kind of monumental as someone who grew up reading his books, and he followed me on Twitter and I was all starstruck. And then I tried reading Arctic Zoo 3 times and I couldn't get past the first 50 pages. And Killer Tea is different, but it's still really a struggle. So I'm just not getting into them, and I think they can find a better home somewhere else. They are personally signed to me, which again, just, it makes me so sad when books are personally signed to me and they feel like a souvenir of a certain time, and yet space, shelves don't keep books that you're not going to read. I just recite it and I let them go. A short story collection that I felt very middle of the road on was Hearts and Bones by Neve Mulvey, and I don't need to keep it because it's one of those books I know I'm never going to reread, and even though I'm loving short story collections at the moment, I think this one is going to be quite forgettable, so I'm just not going to keep this. And then last but not least, we've got 2 non-fiction books, one of which I've read and one of which I haven't read. So first of all, we have I Survived by Victoria Sellers, and this was a non-fiction book I read last year, and the story itself is very shocking, and just despicable in the ways in which what happened to her happened, but also the way the police and everything happened post situation. I think her case wasn't handled very well, and that makes me very sad and disappointed in the way the law system works. But it's an amazing story, it's a brutal story, it's a terrible story. I don't think it's the best writing I've ever read, which makes sense because it's a memoir that's spurred less by her being a writer and more so about her having a story that's really important that needs to be told. So it's one that I appreciate that I read, but I don't think I need to keep. I actually borrowed it from my grandma, so I was never really going to keep it. I tried to return it to my grandma, but she's kind of the reader where she reads a book and she's done with it. She doesn't want to keep all of her books. She just reads it and moves it along, and like, grandma, can't relate. Can't relate at all. But she's just said pass it along, so that's what I intend to do. And then last but not least, we have A Woman Like Her by Sanam Maha, and this is actually, it just sounds like something I would really love, but I haven't picked it up in years, so I need to just let it go. So there you have it. That is my unhaul, which happened across 2 countries. I've done an unhaul across 2 countries quite a few times now, but that's what happens when your book collection is split. Please let me know in the comment section down below, what was the latest disappointing read that you've experienced and why was it disappointing? I'm very curious. Or just leave an emoji if that's what you want to do. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior! For a while there I was collecting these original... What are the birds doing? You can't join my video. Bye! Okay, that gave this one the middle star 3 review. The middle review 3 star...